I've got a really cool article about how magic mushrooms may have shaped our consciousness, separated us from the rest of the animal kingdom, for better or for worse. About 300,000 years ago, an early human was foraging for food in an expansive grassland. He spied a cluster of mushrooms poking out of dark soil, picked one of the brown caps, and examined its darker brown borders and whitish-gray stem. Tentatively, mushrooms naturally occurring psilocybin, a psychedelic compound, hit her bloodstream, eventually traveled into her brain. Scanning her environment rapidly, the human noticed minute details among the waving grasses. Quickly than usual, she identified several different edible plants, and deftly caught fast-moving game for her next. Evidence indicates that early hominids have been picking and eating magic mushrooms for up to 6 million years. A recent review by the Miguel Lilo Foundation in Argentina concludes that psilocybin shaped human consciousness over thousands of generations. It does so by enhancing cognitive function, by increasing connectivity in the brain, affecting the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and anterior cingulate cortex, which impacts memory and decision-making, says Fatima Calvo of the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru. From an evolutionary perspective, psilocybin ingestion could have improved visual abilities and reproductive success. Hell yeah. The review includes studies from neuroscience, biology, and ethnobotany. The exact mechanisms and timelines still remain unclear. Biologist Joshua Macedo Bedoya of the University Nacional Mayor de San Marcos notes a lack of specific evidence pinpointing changes in consciousness due to psilocybin ingestion. Early hominids likely consumed psilocybin mushrooms after descending from trees about 5 to 6 million years ago during the Pleistocene. We found mushrooms in environments rich in decomposing soil from bovids, that's cows, cattle, yak, etc. Theories are that this molecule could have enhanced early humans' visual skills, aiding in hunting and gathering and sexual stimulation. Productive rates. Let's go. Compound might also have triggered mystical experiences, influencing shamanic practices and religious rituals. Over millennia, humans continued encountering magic mushrooms, developing cultural uses for them. Shamanic practices and religious rituals in various parts of the world allowed those who ingested the fungi to have sensory experiences otherwise unattainable. Research cited in the reviews shows humans developed the CYP2D6. We're going to ask Dr. Mark about that gene to synthesize psilocybin, which already has a very low toxicity. Modern-day use of psilocybin under professional guidance can benefit conditions like severe addiction. It can enhance creativity. It can help PTSD, says Calvo. Learning from our ancestors, psilocybin can help us connect with ourselves, face fears, and heal traumas, adds Macedo Bedoya. Tracking the exact timeline of human consciousness changes due to psilocybin remains challenging. Psilocybin's role as catalyst for mystical experiences or cognitive processes raises profound reflections on the ancestral interaction between humans and their environment. Future studies are needed to illuminate the complex biological mechanisms and historical impact on human evolution. This is amazing because Terence McKenna, who some of you may already know, wrote a book called Food of the Gods.
Yes.
1993, where he posited this. He was ridiculed by the mainstream scientific establishment. However, with decades now of research and thought and a loosening of everybody's moral fright about these amazing substances, what we're finding is it looks like McKenna and many of these visionary thinkers may well have been right. I'd like to hand this off to y'all, but first I'd like to say, Dr. Mark, you give us, do you have any information or enlightenment on the CYP D6 gene and psilocybin's interaction with that?
Yeah, so CYP is a family of what are called cytochrome E450 oxidases, which are enzymes that exist in the liver, but they're pretty ubiquitous throughout the animal kingdom and even in insects and fungi. So CYPs are the enzymes that actually, when you take CBD, I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's this elevated liver enzyme issue with CBD. That's exactly the enzymes that they're worried about, because these are oxidases that exist in the liver that basically oxidize compounds and metabolize them to more water-soluble versions, and ultimately for excretion of these compounds. So I would, it's interesting because it's a regulatory enzyme, Matthew. It's there to basically regulate compounds and certain toxins that are in the body. That's about all I know about it. I mean, I don't know why there's
more
a
than I knew.
particular interaction. The CYP.
Could I ask something?
Yeah.
What would this indicate, this gene and this gene pathway, and they being from liver metabolites? Is there anything that you could maybe infer, and we won't hold you to it, but about microdosing with psilocybin? Would there be any risk to the liver?
Well, okay, so just central paradigm of biology, right? So the gene basically codes for the protein, right? So the gene is basically the DNA and the information that basically then turns into, through transitional or translational RNA, it's fed into this mechanism that basically makes proteins, right? So the genes that code for these CYP enzymes is what they're talking about.
Okay.
Now, more recently, in the last 30 or 40 years, there's been something called gene therapy, where what they're doing is they're actually acting on the expression of said genes. So when these genes are expressed, ultimately the proteins that they code for are synthesized. So if you can lower the expression of those at the genetic level, so now you have compounds that are coming into the cell and basically interfering with the regulatory pathway in the nucleus that would basically express genes to code for these proteins. So gene therapy is how sort of the modern way of looking at how drugs are designed, because rather than trying to throw a monkey wrench at the protein, if they could keep the protein from being synthesized by basically blocking that gene somehow, that's what gene therapy is all about. I don't fully understand this connection, but I'll just add one other thing, Matthew. So I was one of those scientists who, again, read a lot of McKenna stuff and be like, whoa, like this is like Star Trek kind of stuff. Like this is like pulling stuff out of thin air. But it's funny, not funny, but I guess ironic how in the years since his passing, there's been a lot of scientific validation for all these crazy ideas that he has. And I have tinnitus. I don't know if anyone else suffers from tinnitus. It's a persistent ringing in the ear.
Friend's dad does. And you're probably going with, he's actually been healing his tinnitus with mushroom microdosing.
That's right. And there's this weird theory that Terrence had about how these harmaline compounds intercalate into DNA and create an electron spin resonance signal that is maybe what people who suffer from tinnitus are hearing. And I used to think to myself, man, that is so like fucking far out. There's no way that can be. But it could actually be. So he was way ahead of his time. He didn't really have the chemistry knowledge that he really needed to. If you read his book, In the Invisible Landscape, it goes through a lot of different things. Matthew, you would love that book, Invisible Landscape.
I've read it.
Yeah. So in that book, he describes all these crazy theories. And yeah, a lot of scientists poo-pooed him. But it turns out that, there was basically a basis for some of the conclusions that he came to.
And this is amazing, and I'm really looking forward to these next couple decades, because it's looking like the more and more science we put to this, the more and more psychologists see this. Work of Leary and the work of McKenna is just being further validated, and I think we're going to flash forward to 50 to 100 years from now. Those two gentlemen are going to be considered two of the greatest leading lights and thinkers the 20th century.
Two
so I do a lot of drugs.
Two quick things before we move on. Isn't Terrence McKenna, isn't he the author of Feigl and Teichl?
Oh, that's Alexander Shulgin.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Sasha Shulgin.
Yeah. Alexander Shulgin actually was a chemist for Dow and made some gnarly chemicals, and that was how he ended up leveraging Dow for his Schedule 1 license, where he then went on to some of the yummiest and most fun phenylethylamine analogs ever.
Yeah, that book, those books are fascinating. And just one quick question. Hold on, Matthew. We're way over time on this. I just have one other question in regards to this, because they say that the average human only uses 10% of their brain. So, is there any study that shows that anyone that uses psychedelics is using more than 10% of their brain? Is there any study out there that shows
so first
that?
off, that was something that kind of came about in an era of misunderstanding about the brain and brain science and pre-CAT scans and MRI. So it's number one, it's just not really true. We should put that to rest. It's kind of like an old
soul wives' tale.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's really interesting, though, at least with psilocybin and LSD, is there's a part. Dr. Mark will get me with the science here, but there's a part of your brain that basically is responsible for filtering incoming sense information that you can be efficable in the 3D reality. Like if we were to see kind of experience everything, every portion of our skin, our eyes, our ears, etc., was receiving incoming, we'd be ineffective and unable to really traverse through the 3D world, feed ourselves, not shit in the stream where we drink, have kids, etc. And one of the things that they found through fMRI work is that when you do LSD and psilocybin, blood flow is actually shunted to that area of the brain. And what I think is going to eventually become seen by science and proven is that a lot of the things that we are seeing are not in fact hallucinations. Mm-hmm. They are phenomena that is extant and constantly available should we choose to or find a way to view it, and our brain just filters that down again so that we can procreate.
Fair enough. All right, well, we got to go to a commercial. We're going to be right back.